The story of Katie Hopkins, from Katie to Hatey. No, not Haiti the country. Hatey meaning hatred, but spelt wrong so that it rhymes. Look, she's gone from reality show star to favourite loudmouth of the alt-right, or the far-right as I insist on calling them, because I refuse to use their preferred pronouns. Oh, by the way, if you're a Hopkins fan, a troll, a staunch conservative, a far-right loony, then you will not enjoy this video. Don't bother watching it. Just pause the video now, like we're going to anyway, scroll down to the comments section and call me an SJW cuck, or say I'm a libtard or something like that, despite the fact that I don't mention my political persuasion at all in this video. In fact, rather worryingly, I even agree with Katie Hopkins on a couple of points. Oh dear. And don't forget to downvote the video too, as if that has any effect on my life whatsoever. Anyway, let's begin. Sadly, practically everybody in Britain has heard of Katie Hopkins. She is a hate figure and she absolutely revels in it. But she's now been introduced to audiences further afield than Britain, America, Europe and so on, thanks to collaborations with YouTube personalities, as well as appearances on Fox News programmes. So this gives me an opportunity to put together a timeline of how she went from reality TV star to becoming a female version of Paul Joseph Watson. Actually, you could argue that she's even worse than him sometimes. In Britain, we first became aware of Katie Hopkins after her appearance on The Apprentice. The Apprentice, the show that has brought us everything that's wrong with the world. You've got Katie Hopkins, of course, and then you've got Karen Brady, who sits alongside Alan Sugar, the man who looks like an angry testicle. She is a member of the House of Lords, and she voted for tax credit cuts, which hits the poorest members of society. What a lovely person. Of course, you've got Donald Trump as well. He's the star of The American Apprentice, and we all know what happened to him. But worse than all of those things combined is the fact that every episode of The Apprentice is identical to the one that preceded it. Alan Sugar, the angry bollock, gathers a lot of people together in a room. He splits them up into teams. Those people name their teams a stupid name. They then do a task that some of them excel at and some are dismal at. Later, he brings them all into a boardroom where they scream and shout at each other. And finally, he tells someone who's not employed that they're fired. And that is what happens every fucking episode. Anyway, I'm slightly veering away from the point, which is Katie Hopkins. Here she is, almost reaching the final of the programme, but she decides to not quite go through with it. Let's have a look at Katie bowing out of The Apprentice.
Flip back to you, Katie. You don't look like a lady that has just been told you've entered the final. I mean, perhaps I've given you a lot to think about and maybe put you on the spot a little bit, but there's two people here that are very employable. And if you have any worries in your mind now, then I'd appreciate it. I think everybody would appreciate it if you spoke up.
Yeah, I know, and I'm so conscious of that, and everything you've said is right. And I'm not wishing to apply excuses. It's just I'm making a decision slightly without having had the courtesy to speak to the people who provide the care for my children. So...
Is that a risk?
It's a risk. It's a discourtesy to my parents. So that's all, and bearing that in mind, and the fact that these two guys so desperately want it, I'm in a really bad place because I don't want to take it away from someone because I haven't made that phone call and got that answer definitively. No, that's not helping you or me or these guys, so I apologise.
I haven't got the time. I can't play with these people's lives, waiting for you to make a phone call to Mum and Dad to see whether they're going to change. And I know you've made me a promise that you're going to move if you get the job, and it's not for me to pry into your affairs, really. But it may be that because you don't want to make a fool of yourself and make a fool of me, that you might want to concede that now and let these other two go forward.
I don't want to make a fool of you, and I don't want to make a fool of me. Okay. I think it's more important that I have the courtesy to get my plans in place first. And therefore, I suggest I stand down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Margaret.
In hindsight, during those long pauses, was Katie Hopkins thinking to herself, winning this would be really, really good, but I could make tons of cash and receive literally all the attention in the world simply by saying racist and bigoted things in the media. What shall I do? Here's Alan Sugar, the boss of The Apprentice, feeling sorry for Katie Hopkins on ITV's This Morning programme. And for British people, there's an extra treat in this clip because Alan is sat next to soccer legend Ray Parlour. If you don't know anything about football, or you're not British, then he's sat next to the rotting corpse of Carrot Top.
Interestingly, we've got the two guys here, two of our guests on the sofa together, and you took part in The Apprentice, didn't you?
Very briefly, I just raised a bit of money on one of the stalls.
Yeah, he done very well. He did very, very well. And he's I'm sorry to say they never got the credit for it, but he raised a load of money on one of the celebrity things we did for charity. Yeah.
Well, some of the people who are on The Apprentice then become celebrities in their own right, don't they? And you actually felt quite sorry for Katie Hopkins, didn't you?
Did you?
For about a minute.
Why?
Well, it was at the rap party where she had made no friends amongst the other candidates there. And we have a kind of a rap party right on the final where all the others are talking and bunnying away with each other, and she was just standing on her own, isolated, and I just looked and I thought, oh dear. So I just went over and had a chat with her. I felt a bit sorry for her being isolated from everybody who decided not to talk to her. And I think we can understand why perhaps they've decided not to talk to her now.
You can probably tell from Alan Sugar's tone that this interview was conducted after Katie Hopkins decided to be racist for money. So let's go back to her humble beginnings as a snob and classist arsehole before she went full alt-right. Here she is on a now famous clip from the same TV show talking about children's names.
So, what is it that you can tell from a name, Katie?
I think you can tell a great deal from a name. You know, for me, there's certain names that I hear them and I think, ooh, and it's associated, ultimately it comes down to the mum or the dad, because they are the ones that gave the child the name. But when I hear screeched across the playground, you know, Tyler, come back here. You know, that's the Tylers, the Charmaines, the Chantels, the Chardonnays.
And has no one shouted out, Esme, come back here?
I don't hear that so much,
Really?
nor do I hear, Ileana, trot back here. You know, you don't hear that, do you? But you hear, Tyler, come here. You know, that. And for me, that summarises everything. A name, for me, is a shortcut. It's a really efficient way of working out what class that child comes from. Do I want my children to play with them?
And why would you say, so if you then, from that, you go, OK, well, they're in a lower class than I am, why do you then not want your child
because
to be...
associated with that isn't just about class, Holes, it's about the fact that they probably haven't done their homework. When my daughter comes home from school, she'll say, Tyler was a real pain today, let's say, because he threw his books across the class and the teacher had to lose her patience. There's a whole set of things that go with children like that are quite a disruptive influence in school, and that's why I don't like those kind of children.
But Monty and Ileana can still be nasty, self-centred airheads, can't they?
I tend to think children that have intelligent names tend to have fairly intelligent parents. A name, I don't know, Simon has asked me to come and play on a play date, and the mother will say, well, where does Simon live? What that mother is not, she's not asking about geographical location, she's sussing out, do we want to be playing with Simon or not?
Anna May.
Hello.
Go for it.
This is snort-worthy, Katie. I mean, I just can't believe that you're such an insufferable snob. And I can tell you that if you do let one of your little darlings go and play with a working-class child, they almost certainly won't come home singing My Old Man's a Dustman. It's safe, really, nothing's going to happen to them. Working-class children are doing incredibly well, and for you to categorise at state schools, and for you to categorise them because of their names, which they didn't even choose themselves, is cruel and unkind and so snooty. It's just so old-fashioned. And, yeah, I don't know who your children are mixing with, but it's not the children's friends who will make them do well in the end. And I can also tell you that on Friday I was at my daughter's graduation. She qualified as a doctor. I've got 2 doctors in the family, went to state schools. I'm the daughter of an Irish immigrant. And there were Dr. Kylie's graduating, Dr. Charmaine's. So tell me, if you were sick or one of your children was sick, would you let a Dr. Kylie treat your children? Or would it be too appalling because they're working class?
Well, the lawyers I work with, I can't think of a single Charmaine nor a Kylie.
Okay,
I don't meet many myself. I meet a lot of Horatios.
Charmaine Cree, the Australian Paralympian gold, silver and bronze medalist. Tyler Cowan, New York Times journalist and professor of economics. Brandon Flowers, musician, lead killer lead singer of the Killers.
And are your opinions not really restricting your children?
They are, but you know what?
But,
we
why
haven't got
would
a
you
lot
do
of time.
that? But
We
you
haven't got a lot of time.
Why would you do that?
We are really time short in this world, and we need shortcuts to make decisions.
That's why you shouldn't be sneering
it's very
at people,
effective.
Katie. It's about
very
sneering.
quick. It's about making fast choices for your children that you think are for the best.
I know
and one
my
day they'll get
friends-
to do their own thing.
My friends at primary school were from all sorts, and they're the people who've seen me through my life, through illness, through bereavement, through having my own children. And now I don't even think about where they came from, what their names are. They're just my dear, dear friends. And you're really robbing your children of the chance to be decent human
This is
beings.
all
It's
very
about
noble.
kindness.
When parents come up to me, they'll say, I read your article or whatever about, you know, what children are called and the fact you wouldn't let your children play with them. And they'll say, I wouldn't say it, but that's what I do.
Well, snobs attract snobs, what can we say?
Loads of women are doing the
My
same
name
thing.
is Anna May, and I was not allowed to play with certain children when I was at school because their families knew I was an Irish immigrant. And yeah, I have to say that me and my children have gone on to do a whole lot better than some of their children. Now, that's not bragging, that's just a fact. So they should have really betted on me because I probably would have helped their children do well.
All right, Katie, so that's your view on Christian names. So what happens about the surnames then? Do you judge someone on their surname?
That's sinister.
Surnames, no. I mean, I don't really get involved in surnames. I don't really know many of the surnames of the children of the friends of my children, so I wouldn't judge them on their surnames. It's
Because
just
you're on very dangerous territory. You start to judge someone on their surname, aren't
Well, as I said, I don't judge people on their surnames, but certainly I do make a very quick decision based on their first names. And there's a whole bunch of first names that I don't like. I don't like footballers' names. I don't like names after seasons of the year. I don't like geographical location names, celebrity names, things like Apple, things like, you know, Tilly Fizz or Jolly Apple, whatever they've decided to call their crazy.
Poppy.
My child's called Poppy.
Yes.
It's a
Well,
flower.
it's a flower.
A geographical
classical.
seasonal.
No.
They're not
Oh,
like Latin.
Poppy's quite
You should
jolly.
call to the Latin name for Poppy. That would have been really posh.
Interestingly, though, other people have criticised me for calling her Poppy because they say Poppy's a naughty name. So
you like-
parents
did you
do
say-
criticise
what about
each other.
geographic stuff?
Geographic. Oh, so Brooklyn or London.
Your
or...
child's called India.
Yes, but, you know, that's because it's not related to a location. That's because it's
India
related
isn't
to
a
a
location?
family. No.
We're talking about education?
India's a very, very lovely name for a very lovely child.
I think
I
Katie was
think-
on gas
I
and
think-
air when she chose those names.
Yeah, I think you'd sort of... It's a little hollow.
I think
You're
they're
doing it
beautiful. I
yourself.
think you've chosen beautiful names for your children, and I would never think to judge them by that.
I do
until I
judge
met
children
them.
by their names.
That's
I do make
terrible.
assumptions, and lots of
Listen
other
to what you're
parents do.
saying. You judge children
Yes.
on their names.
Yes, Holly.
Katie,
Yes, I do that, Holly,
it's
because
extraordinary.
it's
Where does it
typical.
Final point here. So, if your child, if India or Poppy or Maximilian come home to you and say, my best friend, Chardonnay, would like to come round for supper.
Oh, that wouldn't happen because I'd have shortcutted that out a long time before. We don't achieve best friend status with Chardonnay.
But you can't- later
Someone
on-
named after
later-
wine is not coming through our home, are they now, Philip?
No, and she'd probably eat her peas off a knife anyway, Philip, so she wouldn't last.
She's more of a
If she'd
probably
got through
black
the door.
tower or a blue nun.
Oh, stop. Stop right there. Thank you very much. Right, Darren Brown is here after the break.
What's telling about this interview is two things. Number one, you can see how Katie's being deliberately snobby, positioning herself as the person to hate, much like how Piers Morgan and Paul Joseph Watson do. She is determined to say contrary things. She has a mission and she succeeds. Number two, this morning, the show she was appearing on broadcast between roughly 10 a.m. and midday and is watched solely by housewives, new mums and the chronically unemployed. And yet this clip went viral despite the tiny audience, thanks to Twitter and newspaper articles. The relatively under-the-radar Katie Hopkins was getting a name for herself as a prude and a snob, but could she go one stage one stage further? Well, I think we know the answer to that, don't we?
What the fuck? How come everybody that you disagree with is automatically a Nazi, huh? How come anybody with a different opinion from yours is straight away a goddamn Nazi? I've had it up to about here with your bullshit.
By 2015, Katie Hopkins was writing for The Sun newspaper, a controversial right-wing rag run by Rupert Murdoch. Try saying that 10 times. A rag that has frequently published inflammatory articles about subjects known to trigger conservative snowflakes, such as Muslims or immigration. So it is no surprise that The Sun allowed an article by Hopkins where she wishes for rescued migrants to be stopped using gunships and being shot alive. She also refers to them as cockroaches. Here's Russell Brand on that story.
Katie Hopkins is like an evil Nostradamus. She prays for dead bodies to float in the water And then the world delivers. 950 immigrants have drowned trying to find a new home, trying to find a new life. But what caused them to have to find a new life? What problems are they fleeing? And are we in any way involved in that? Or is humanity like this separate little series of independent units hating each other from separate shores?
They boarded their boats in Libya and it sank out at sea. Some of these migrants will have spent their life savings on this trip. They have survived the world's most dangerous migrant journey. And they may soon find that they've got to a continent which doesn't really want them.
So 950 migrants are feared to have drowned after a boat capsized in the Mediterranean Sea. Last year, over 3,000 migrants died in similar conditions. That's a 9/11's worth of immigrants dying each year. I mean, I know 9/11 was more skewed towards white people that spoke English, so they're definitely a better class of person, but the fact is these are actual sort of people, really. But not if you listen to Katie Hopkins, who some people will think of as a sort of irrelevant, vacuous foghorn of hate, blasting vitriol and mindless nonsense. But she isn't. She's merely the voice of, in many cases, established policy. One of the things Katie Hopkins said is these people are like cockroaches. When people are like cockroaches, what value does their life have? None. They're just going to spring up all over the place. They breed like hell. This is actually a common view of displaced people or unpopular sections of society. A notable psychological and ideological compatriot of Katie Hopkins is Himmler. You remember from the Nazis?
Hey!
He said that Jews are bedbugs and rats, and it was the duty of mankind to extinguish them. And when Katie Hopkins says we should have gunboats repelling immigrants, she is expressing a comparable mentality. This is not hyperbole to compare Katie Hopkins to Hitler. This is not hyperbole to say that Katie Hopkins is merely a more ugly mouthpiece to accepted policy. It's simply some facts.
The arrival of better spring weather has encouraged more migrants to make the trip.
Spring is in the air, the daffodils are blooming, migrants are floating by, Katie Hopkins is smiling. What it is to be alive.
Many have come from Eritrea, Somalia or Syria. The migrants queued up in silence.
If we had to move from immigrants to migrants now...
Italy continues to rescue migrants.
Do you know what would help these people? Let's call them migrants, because that word immigrant has become really unpopular. Let's call them migrants now, out of respect. Should we rescue them? No, out of disrespect.
But in November, it scaled down its search and rescue efforts. It hoped that this might deter migrants from making the trip. That hasn't happened.
If the politicians won't stop the boats, we'll stop the boats.
So what Katie Hopkins says is, rescue boats? I'd use gunships to stop migrants. You may as well set up a Libya to Italy P&O ferry. No, I don't care. She says, show me pictures of coffins. Well, there they are, Katie. Show me bodies floating in the water. There you go, Katie. Play violins and show me skinny people looking sad. I still don't care.
It has become more and more dangerous to attempt. So far this year, 1,000 migrants may have died trying to get to Europe.
One of the things that I always forget is that these are just like people. I saw a bit of footage once of a Syrian bloke in an Italian kind of refugee camp, and he was like, I was working in an insurance firm last week, this is a pain in the arse. And it was the normalness of him that sort of hit me, like, oh yeah, he's just like a normal bloke. Like, if something terrible happened in London or Birmingham or Manchester or Cardiff or Glasgow, we'd all be like, oh shit, we better get out of here. Migrants and refugees are heading for Italy and Greece from all over the Middle East and Africa, driven by war, Islamist insurgencies, caused by destabilisation, Western interventions and climate-related drought and famine. So climate change is a result of a kind of corporate colonialism and our irresponsible attitudes to fossil fuels and energy, and we've destabilised those regions for our own economic ends. Take Libya, where these particular dead migrants came from. In 2011, the US, UK, France and Italy backed NATO airstrikes that overthrow Gaddafi. The excuse was the protection of Libyan civilians. That's always the reason, isn't it? The real reason was, of course, always oil reserves, the largest in Africa. Libya has since descended into an abyss of lawlessness, chaos and violence. So people want to leave that lawlessness and chaos and violence the same way we would. There's an ongoing war for resources, and the victims are always just people with different colours and different accents, different types of moustaches and hats. People.
On the quayside, they huddle together, poor, hungry and sick.
I mean, isn't it a bit mad? to just see human litter strewn about. This is the kind of images that Katie Hopkins don't care about, so we could show her, no, I don't care, no, I don't care. Katie, please, come back to humanity, Katie Hopkins, is what I tweeted, because I don't think there's any point in condemning her or trying to silence her or anything. I think just acknowledge that that is a mentality. Not only that, it's not an extremist one if you take policy, it's just someone describing what's happening. It's not her fault at all. She's just the pus emerging from the pimple of our policy.
Africa's migrants have been cast adrift, but they will keep coming, and with fewer patrols to stop them and to rescue them, yet more will be lost at sea.
If the politicians won't stop the boats, we'll stop the boats.
If, compassion is not a component, then there's no humanity left to save. Once we kill the compassion in ourselves, then we are all then cockroaches waiting for the apocalypse, and it can't come quickly enough.
I sort of agree with a lot of what Russell Brand was saying there. It's an interesting position to not blame Katie Hopkins for not having any compassion, implying that she's probably damaged in some way, so that's why she is like she is. However, at the same time, it's not helpful to anybody to broadcast her views, as it has upset many people. So, what's the solution here? We all know the opinions of far-right-leaning or hardline conservatives, but do we really need to give them a megaphone to help spread intolerance, anger and fear? It's a difficult question to answer, because if you silence these people, you do remove their all-important freedom of speech. But at the same time, there are hate speech laws that stop people from going too far with their right to express themselves. When it comes to people like Paul Joseph Watson and many of the people connected to Defend Europe, for example, it's very, very easy to mock them and destroy their arguments via Twitter or YouTube, which makes non-bigoted people feel a lot better. But is it stopping the spread of bigotry? No, not at all. Bigotry is a massive money spinner, and it can get you so much attention. No wonder so many people are doing it online. So, I'm personally undecided on the free speech issue. As we will learn later in the video, some of Katie Hopkins' words have inspired violent attacks on brown people, but likewise, Richard Spencer's mere existence has inspired attacks on himself too.
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
But if I were to want Katie Hopkins to be stopped from writing any more hate-fueled articles about migrant cockroaches and so on, I would approach the issue in a different way than the public did. Look at it this way. The main problem I have with Katie Hopkins' article isn't necessarily the author. Yes, she's an abhorrent person and she probably shouldn't be allowed to express her extremist views, and therein lies the problem. It's the publishers who are at fault for allowing Katie's article to go to print. So when the inevitable petition to have Katie Hopkins sacked reaches 310,000 signatures, it was ultimately pointless. Because people should be protesting and petitioning the newspapers themselves for allowing Hopkins' hatred to be put in print. Or more specifically, the editors of The Sun and the hierarchy, the management team behind The Sun newspaper, should be the ones who are targeted. If the correct people were targeted, then maybe they'd be much more under pressure in the future and would think twice before spreading hate via their newspaper. Perhaps the ire of 310,000 people could make them see some compassion towards refugees. It's wishful thinking, but it could happen, hopefully. Now I've got two feel-good stories for you to cheer you up after the depressing Katie Hopkins cockroach situation. There was in fact another petition doing the rounds at the same time as the other one, calling for Katie Hopkins to be replaced with 50,000 Syrian refugees, which gained more than 20,000 signatures in less than 48 hours in September 2015. And then, a mere 8 months plus a year after the article was published, it was finally removed from the Sun's website. Bravo guys, really good going. Congratulations. And now here's Ian Hislop pressing Katie Hopkins on the whole cockroach story.
We're looking at a period where immigration became a huge topic for the press, and it was immediately very popular. Why do you think that is?
I think two things will always sell newspapers. One of them is Maddie McCann and one of them is migrants.
You used the term cockroaches in a piece about migrants. Is that something that you still stand by?
If you pick out one word out of a 800-word, I don't know, 600-word, whatever piece...
It's quite a strong word.
It probably could stand alone. We were always taught that there was only a few people that could withstand, or a few animals or few creatures that could withstand a nuclear holocaust. So I was talking about the enduring nature of migrants able to cross the Mediterranean, and I used the term cockroach.
You referred to a plague of feral humans. I mean, are they all feral? I mean, is it actually a plague? Aren't they just a group of people?
It's because you look at them and think, you are nothing like me. You don't understand how our culture works. You think it's OK to molest a young boy in a swimming pool. You think it's OK to rape women.
You say you've met these people. Haven't you met any asylum seekers who you've talked to and thought you're an ordinary human being? You're not a feral human being?
I think these individuals from some of these cultures they come from are feral humans. I stand by those words. I use those words explicitly. I think I reflect the national conversation. And I don't see that as hatred, and I don't see that as distrust or mistrust. I see that as people wanting to protect the thing they love. And, you know, this would be an interesting thing about...
But do they do that by hating the other?
No, I don't see that.
No, I'm just reading your stuff, thinking
this
is filled with hate, isn't it? A lot of it. You really hate this, you hate that, you hate... It's part of the shock jock genre, isn't it?
If someone's been around for 12 years or so, speaking their version of truth with a now massive audience, there's a reason that gains support, and it isn't to do with speaking hate. It's because there is a sense that there is a whole world of stuff we can no longer say, and it's because there's a whole world of state media that appear to be very biased in a particular direction. It's because of people like you that there are people like me. And I've always said this, that you guys, the liberal elite in London, are responsible for me. You are Dr. Frankenstein, and I am your monster.
A British reality star, Hatey Hopkins, got a lot of attention when she said, quote, "I don't believe you can be fat and happy. I think that's just a cop-out." Well, the Twitterverse exploded, some accusing her of fat shaming and bullying. But she set out to prove her point by gaining 50 pounds. To do so, she ate 6,500 calories a day, a ritual she said often brought her to tears. Hatey joins us now from London to talk about this. Hatey, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, you say that all of this was to prove there's really no excuse for being overweight. I have to say it has upset a lot of people. You don't need me to tell you that. I'm sure you've seen some of the reaction. And there are some people that have really gone to bat because they say obesity is not a choice for them. For some, it's a medical condition, or others that say you're not taking into account some of the emotional issues at hand. What do you say to some of that criticism?
You know, I think for far too long now we've made excuses as to why people are overweight. Now, of course, there's a tiny percentage of the population that have medical conditions that mean they are more likely to become overweight. But for the vast majority, it's very simple. If you eat too much and you don't move enough, you get fat. And I decided I would prove that point. So in 3 months, I gained half my body weight by simply sitting around and eating a lot. And now I'm on my journey back down. And kind of my message to people, I think, is that there are no excuses. We can't keep hiding behind things. We can't keep saying, I've got big bones, my genes are different, it runs in the family, it's because of this, that, or the other.
And I hear what you're saying, but what's interesting is now you're on a mission to do the opposite, to lose the weight that you've gained. From what I've read, it's proving to be difficult. You still have 35 pounds to go, definitely a lot harder than the weight to be put on. Does that bring you any compassion to those that struggle with their weight, especially for those that metabolism or eating habits or schedules make it a lot more difficult to lose weight?
No, you know, let's be really clear. I just have 14 pounds left to go now. And the thing I've done is I've not joined a gym. I don't have a personal trainer. I don't have a chef at home. People imagine I have a chef. I have no idea why. I've done this outside of office hours. So I've tried to replicate other women's lives, other men's lives as far as I can. And whilst there has been Twitter backlash, there's also been a group of people that have been incredibly supportive, that have said, you know what, you're the only person that's being honest about this. It's time I sat up. It's time I did something. and there's this group of people that are joining To Fat and Back and are losing weight with me, and I think that's a really powerful thing, and I welcome people to join it. I do have an understanding now of what it feels like to be horribly overweight. I do know it is hard to be fat.
Well, and you know, I think that's one thing that struck me as I was reading your account. There were times that you said that you would weep as you consumed cupcakes and burgers and French fries, and that you aren't a crier. You're not someone that was crying at your wedding or cried during birth of your children.
No,
these emotions came to you that you've never experienced before. I think there could be some people sitting at home right now saying, I'm overweight and I'm happy. I did an interview with a lovely young woman who started a campaign and said she's finally come to peace with her weight. She works out, she eats healthy, is her place. She's happy. Can you come to a place where you can agree, maybe not you, maybe you weren't happy, but there are some people out there that might be overweight and happy?
No, not at all. You know, you've got two options when you get big, and those two options are to do something about it and take the tough road, or take the easy road and give up. And when you give up, you've got to decide, look, what am I going to be miserable all my life? No, I'm going to give up and I'll say I'm fat and happy. But can a fat person be happy? Absolutely not. The only way to go is back down where you were, because nobody wants to be carrying extra 50 pounds, 100 pounds, because it hurts your knees, it hurts your heart, it's bad for your body, and I think it just makes you very, very unhappy as a person.
Now, this is where I slightly agree with Katie Hopkins, which does make me feel dirty, if I'm honest. It is a good idea in principle to gain weight and then lose weight in order to encourage other people to lose weight at the same time. But the way she executes those ideas aren't very great. For example, she is essentially still sneering at fat people, going, oh, look at me, I can do it, why can't you? It's inspiring to see fat celebrities become thin or muscular or fit. But when it's someone you hate, who actively hates you, it's hardly encouraging to get thin thanks to her doing the same thing, is it? Now here's Katie Hopkins appearing on BBC Two's daily politics programme after, rather amazingly, being praised by the future President of the United States.
Donald Trump. More than 500,000 people have signed a parliamentary petition calling for him to be banned from entering the UK. It stems from his announcement earlier this week that a Trump presidency would see a ban on all Muslim people entering the US. He was roundly condemned in America, but also by British politicians and other public figures for saying that. And in response, he tweeted, quote, the United Kingdom is trying hard to disguise their massive Muslim problem. Everybody is wise to what is happening. Very sad. Be honest. But while the majority of people in British public life joined in the condemnation, he had one champion. Yes, the columnist Katie Hopkins, who said, don't demonise Trump. He speaks for millions of Americans, and who can blame them for not wanting to end up like us? And it turns out that Donald, or the Donald as he's known to his fans, is a fan of Katie's. He tweeted, thank you to respected columnist Katie Hopkins of the Daily Mail for her powerful writing on the UK's Muslim problems. So there we go. Well, Katie Hopkins is a columnist for the Daily Mail online, and she joins us now from our Plymouth studio. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Now, you supported Donald Trump's words on this, but you also said it was totally impractical to do. So how do you square that?
I think what I was saying was that I support the ideas behind what he's trying to do. You know, ultimately, Donald Trump is trying to show true leadership. The Americans felt very let down by what Obama said some 2 days after 14 people were gunned down. And I think in that kind of vacuum, what you see is Donald Trump stand up and at least say something that sounded like he wanted to protect his nation, protect America. And that's what I stand behind, is we need strong leadership at these times. And I'm actually personally a little tired of your BBC bias, which of course keeps telling us that most people support banning Trump from the UK, whereas actually it's only 500,000 people clicking on a mouse.
When did I say most people are in favour of banning?
Well, you went through a long list, didn't you, of Boris Johnson, people clicking on a petition.
Yeah, but when did I say most
figures.
British people? I have no evidence
let's
for the
talk
views
about
of
the
most
people
British
that...
people. So let's come back, instead of saying things about me which aren't true, let's come back to what you say.
Let's talk about the people who
so let
do
me ask you
support
this.
what Trump
Hold on,
says.
I asked the question, so let me ask you this. You said that what Mr. Trump said is, quote, a lot of hot air. Why is that showing leadership? How is hot air leadership?
Because sometimes, in times of real difficulty, in times of fear, what you want from your leadership is to say, we are not going to tolerate this. We are going to protect our country. And that's what Donald Trump has done. And actually, if you look around you outside of the bubble that you guys are in, actually, people are fearful. I work with people in London that ring their families on a daily basis to check they're okay. My family aren't that keen on me going to London right now. My friends won't go there. Paris has taken a 50% cut in its tourism trade. I think what we see is there is fear on the streets. We may not want to acknowledge it, and you may want to talk about that petition, but then why don't we talk about the other petition of 400,000 signatures, which people say, let's stop migration while we think about how we're going to protect our country. And one of the things that really annoys me, of course, is our Muslim community do not stand up and separate themselves enough, for my liking, from the very fearful acts of terrorism that are right here on our shores.
But there have been Muslim demonstrations against what's been happening in their name. There have been Muslim leaders who've stood out and talked about it and condemned what they've been doing. You seem to keep on setting a test for them that they have to meet all the time. They're not required to do that, are they? If Mr. Trump got his way and Muslims were banned for a period from entering the United States, how would you enforce it? How would you know who was a Muslim and who wasn't?
I've been very clear on my article on the Daily Mail Online. You can't enforce that sort of thing. You don't have religion announced on your passport. I said myself, what we're going to do, stay there and, eat a hot dog and sing glory, glory, hallelujah.
Your definition of true leadership is to propose something that's totally impractical.
No, my definition of true leadership is be able to stand up and say, we're not going to tolerate that.
And propose something that you admit cannot be implemented.
Of course, you can knock the specifics, but actually what he's
trying
to do is
that was the specific. That was the one thing he proposed. And you've now admitting it could not be implemented, correct?
Andrew, he has got millions of supporters in the US.
That's not what I'm asking you.
His poll ratings have just risen. And I think if you ask the British public, there's a lot of people behind the kind of sentiment that Donald Trump is expressing, is that we will not tolerate being taken over by forces that make us fearful to live in our own country.
And his answer to that, a man who would be president and leader of the free world, is to propose something that even you, his greatest British supporter, admits is totally impractical.
I never claimed to be Trump's greatest British supporter.
No, you've said that we've gone too far in regards to the Muslim population and, quote, we've lost control of vast swathes of our country. Where are these vast swathes?
There's plenty of places in the UK that other people will tell you, I can tell you, I would not walk through. I would not walk through. I don't think it's legally accurate to actually name certain areas. I think there's been some legal issues around that.
No, there's no legal issue. You can name areas. Tell us these vast swathes of our country where we have lost control.
If you didn't talk so much, I might be able to, darling.
Well, just give me a name.
I do think if I was to walk through certain areas of our population where over 90% of people are Muslim, I wouldn't fare too well. And I think my friends in the Jewish communities have also found they've been spat at, they've been shouted at, they're intimidated. Sure. Some people would fear
That's
to
terrible
tread.
behaviour, but it's not losing control. So let me ask,
we have lost control.
Let me ask you one more time.
We have lost control. Andrew,
Give me one example of a vast swathe of country. Give me one example of a vast swathe of our country where we, the authorities, have lost control.
I know those places exist, Andrew. Later on, I'm going to my child's nativity play. And do you know what? I'm proud that my school has one because so many don't. So, these days, all we can have is multi-faith assemblies, and that's not something I'm proud of in my country.
In other words, you can't tell me, and so you'll talk about your child's nativity play.
I welcome the Daily Politics to follow me as I go through some of the areas where I will be spat at, I will be shouted at, I will be told
we can't follow you unless you tell us where they are.
No, come with me, Andrew. I invite your camera crews to come with me and see who tells me to cover up my hair, cover up my face. I mean, I can see that might be an advantage. I'm welcoming you, Andrew. Join with me. I still think a large percentage of our population stand behind Donald Trump, and I don't think the BBC are giving that enough airtime.
OK, Katie Hopkins, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.
From Plymouth there.
By this point in her career, Katie Hopkins was regularly being described as a professional troll, and to her credit, she has the ability to trigger left-wing people so very easily with her extreme views. To be fair, she also occasionally triggers centrists and right-leaning people who have some semblance of a heart left. Having petitions calling for her head or having her removed from employment only emboldens Hopkins and makes her appear as a rebel to her bigoted fans. On the subject of bigoted fans, here's an example of Katie Hopkins saying racial profiling is good, and then being praised by an account that is called Anti-Juden SS, and that has a swastika in its avatar.
I do not believe this is Oh, wait a minute. Richard Spencer has tweeted about ethnic cleansing again. I'll be right back.
Katie Hopkins then went on to retweet said praise before eventually removing the tweet, but not actually apologising. Now, I think the lowest point of Katie Hopkins' angry media career so far has been largely overlooked thanks to the cockroach story and something that we'll be talking about a little bit later on. It's her Daily Mail article about the soccer player, or footballer to normal people, who is now in prison for grooming an underage girl and doing various things with her in his Range Rover. Okay? Now, here's the article which says, "Put away the rope. Adam Johnson broke the law with a girl who knew exactly what she was doing, but he's not a paedophile and he doesn't deserve prison and a Twitter lynching." Well, he does deserve prison because he did something illegal. But this whole article was Katie Hopkins victim-shaming a 15-year-old girl and also trying to slut-shame her as well. It's the lowest of the low. And here is some of the article right now. 834 WhatsApp messages. That's the sum of it. 834 messages sent between Adam Johnson and a teenage fan so besotted by a footballer she stood waiting for him on his birthday with a cake. Now, it's very interesting how a journalist can make the victim of this crime seem like the worst person in the world for just standing waiting for a footballer with a cake because he has groomed her. But you don't mention that in the first part, do you? When she finally got to meet him in his car, she even recorded their sad fumblings in the dark so she could prove to her mates she had only gone and done it. She's only gone and snagged herself a footballer who made it quite clear the next time they meet he would be looking to get her jeans off and do much more than kiss. There's no way to disguise the fact that he's in control. He is trying to, get her to fuck him, basically. But the first part of the paragraph still kind of makes her the horrible person for proving to her friends in the age of technology via Snapchat or whatever she did that she has got a famous person within a 1 foot of her, because you never ever see a celebrity and take a selfie with them, do you? Never. She looked way older than 15 and acted older than 15, something everyone has told her in her past all of the time. Yeah, if someone's trying to have sexual contact with you and they're over the age of 15 and you are 15, legally that makes it a crime, unless you look older than 15. Oh, Jesus. Instead of being a hormonal teen, stalking someone famous for attention, desperate for a chance to have something her friends do not, a penis of a footballer. She doesn't say that. She is a tiny little child so prepubescent and naive that he's the, quote, pedo, and she's the one who's been groomed. Well, let's look at the evidence, the clear evidence. Yes, she is the one who's been groomed. That was determined by a court of law, okay? And, yes, he's been labelled a pedo again by law. That is the title that he has been given, a sex offender. He has to sign a register because he's done a crime. And also, she writes that she is so prepubescent. To be fair, all women are technically prepubescent because they shave off their pubes. And the Twitter mob, she writes in bold writing, the Twitter mob and the press is buying her story. Inexplicably, they love the idea that she is just an innocent child behind a screen, sat there in a training bra and ankle socks, looking for nothing more than a signed shirt and a season ticket to Sunderland. I believe she already was a regular attender to Sunderland. Yes, it's nice to get free gifts, but to label a little girl and sitting in behind a screen in a court, wearing, but just the way it's phrased, ankle socks and a training bra. Now, it's not the greatest court attire. It might not be good to your case if you came into court just wearing your underwear, or it could be hyperbole put in an article by a woman who's paid to say the opposite thing to other people are thinking. They gather with their stones, waiting to throw them at the, quote, dirty nonce, reinforcing each other's daft logic, goading each other to give him a beating, kick him whilst he's down, watch him lose everything they've never had but always wanted. I think you'll find, guys, that when he's in prison, he might get a little bit of a slap around the face for being a dirty nonce. You don't need the general public to do that. They might be saying, oh, here's a guy who's got a lovely wife at home, who's very attractive. It's very much like the Hugh Grant, Divine Brown situation, where he went with her, the prostitute, who, you know, hardly looks like a supermodel like Liz Hurley does. And people are saying, but Liz Hurley at home when you're going with a street prostitute, it doesn't make any sense. But in this case, it's a footballer going with a child, which is a billion times worse, and therefore some people have the right to be pissed off by that. Katie Hopkins continues, look around at these people. They are no different to the nutters of ISIS gathering to watch gay men being thrown from buildings. Yes, the girl in this case was 15, but can we truly define the age of sexual consent by something so arbitrary as a number? Legally, yes, you can. That is why there's an age of consent. But it's a strange argument, isn't it? You see it all over Facebook. I saw it all over Facebook and Twitter. People saying, yeah, well, in other countries, the age of consent is 14. So if you put it on that basis, this is totally legal. It's not. Because in this country, that's not the age of consent. It's really fucking simple. And you're pulling your hair out thinking, but the facts are in front of your face and you're trying every trick in the book to defend this guy. Why? And the question comes up, why are you trying to defend this guy so much? And it can't help but thinking, maybe you're a bit of a paedophile yourself. Yes, Adam Johnson knew how old she was. Because that's what turned him on. Yes, he knew how old she was, right? Oh. Yes, he is a cheating, selfish, arrogant, dick-driven, dim-witted specimen who clearly wasn't worthy of his God-given talent or his loyal girlfriend and the daughter that she had. Yep, just to rub salt in the wounds, his girlfriend's not only fucking fit, but she's also dropped out of Sprock as well. The law is a game of strategy and tactics. Adam Johnson was going to plead innocent, switched tactics, and got it wrong. It's the same reason people settle out of court, not because they are guilty, but because it is financially prudent when faced with the shocking costs of a trial in court. Yeah, the shocking costs for a millionaire like Adam Johnson. Quote, well, you wouldn't like it if it was your daughter getting her hymen stretched, screeched a creepy member of the mob. You're right again, but then I wouldn't have too much sympathy for my daughter either. If you play with fire, you get your fingers burned. And if you promise a bloke he can do more, he'll take your 50 Shades of Grey and make it pretty damn black and white. Interesting way of looking at it, Katie Hopkins. Okay. It's almost beyond parody. It's just... Oh, I'm going to just carry on, okay. Just good to see that she will be supporting her daughter in that situation, by the way. Oh, honey, I see you just turned 15 and a footballer has taken your virginity. You seem quite upset by that. Almost like you're quite an innocent creature, really, not quite at the age to make these important decisions yourself. Well, if you play with fire, you get your fingers burned, you stupid bitch. Now fuck off out of my house. Katie Hopkins says, I'll be wanting to know why my daughter was schlepping round after some lame-brained footballer who probably couldn't even read when she could be doing so much better than that. Yeah, if you're going to lose your virginity before the age of 15, someone who's much older than you, at least have it with a footballer who has intelligence. I mean, where is Clark Carlisle in this situation? What? Hospital? Okay, bad example. That's it. Probably Gary Lineker. That's the only other intelligent footballer I can think of. Let's not bring him into this. I quite like him. Anyway, as I was saying, funny enough, Daddy Darling, as in the dad of the girl who was fiddled by a nonce, he wasn't bothered about his daughter's, quote, attacker until she had let things get out of hand. She got drunk and gossiped to the wrong people. Her name was dirt at school, and suddenly she needed an out. Yep. Victim blaming, victim blaming. And then she says, from would-be wag to slag. And then suddenly she needed more of a Jamor label. Victim. From wag to slag. From wag to slag. It's the strangest link I've ever seen in my life. But there you go. That's Hatey Hopkins for you there. And, as well as victim, £1 million payoff is as good as in the bank. Again, assumptions. We don't know how much money this girl got from Adam Johnson, if any, or whether he just went to prison. It's not been disclosed. My email inbox is rammed to the rafters with people grateful that finally someone is brave enough to say what cannot be said. To articulate the voice of the repressed, to speak freely, because insults, police custody, or the mob do not intimidate me. Defending paedophiles. Adam Johnson was only ever guilty of being stupid, and, crucially, of being a paedophile. I shouldn't be more proud than this generation of girls that has outpaced boys at school, university and in industry. Although if you say that out loud, surely you're a feminazi, aren't you? I tell my girls to stand up for what they believe in, but in this brave new world I tell my son to be careful. Be wary of girls. Girls are exceptionally smart at getting exactly what they want. End on victim blaming to really ram that point home. Now there are many examples of Hatey Hopkins saying offensive or near-the-knuckle things on Twitter. Here's a tweet which I actually found quite funny by her. Unfortunately, the timing couldn't be worse. Life expectancy in Scotland is 59.5 years old. Goodness me, that lot will do anything to avoid working until retirement. Now, it's not laugh out loud funny, but it is still a joke. And yes, it's still mildly offensive, if not quite offensive to some of the people watching now. Unfortunately, she tweeted that tweet the same day that there was a massive helicopter crash in Glasgow. A big tragic event which had that tweet alongside it. Now, some of you are going to hate me for the rest of your life for saying this, but at this point I think we should give Hatey Hopkins the benefit of the doubt. She did say that the joke was not linked to the helicopter crash. Okay? Now, if she's telling the truth, then what that shows is Hatey Hopkins can literally tweet anything she wants nowadays, and people will instantly think she's trying to be offensive or try and link it to a tragic event. If she posts a selfie, people think that she'll be smiling over some kind of tragic event happening somewhere in the world. Now, this is not a defence of Hatey Hopkins in any way whatsoever. What I'm trying to say, my point is that she has built her brand so well that she can say anything and cause offence, which is exactly the point of her existence. That's where she gets her fans. That's how she makes her money, by being offensive all the time. State the bleeding obvious, I know, but she has cultivated the exact same image that Milo Yiannopoulos has. If he is to appear at a college campus, he knows there's going to be riots. He knows there's going to be protests about his appearance, and that just makes him look like a badass to his very sad, very angry, and possibly very virginal fans. Hatey Hopkins has mastered that technique, and anything she says is pretty much offensive. Now, that's not saying that she does it by accident, as these tweets show you. She's genuinely trying to hurt people's feelings. But hopefully overall you see my point. But as far as being a hate machine, she's fucking nailed it. You can't fucking deny that. So really it's quite a progression for her from her days on The Apprentice to now being a loudmouthed bigot. But what really got people's attention about Hatey Hopkins was a recent tweet which was sent after the Manchester bombings in the UK. Here is a clip from a video I made about Paul Joseph Watson, where a comedian called Josie Long is explaining far-right people and their tactics, and Paul Joseph Watson is obviously going to dismiss her because he is far-right himself and he needs to defend his ideology. Here is Josie talking about Hatey Hopkins plus Nigel Farage and that now famous tweet.
Hatey Hopkins, up until very recently, having a mainstream show that everyone could listen to the whole time.
Right, because when terrorists are mowing down people in a van, they're not shouting Allah Akbar, they're shouting Hatey Hopkins.
You're not far wrong there, Paul. Muslim knocked unconscious by thugs who then vandalised his home with racist graffiti, quoting Hatey Hopkins' final solution tweet. The victim woke from the attack to find racist graffiti daubed on his walls, which included "We need a final solution," a phrase controversially tweeted by Hopkins in the wake of the Manchester terror attack. Now, this incident happened a day before Paul's video was released, but wasn't reported on until a few days after his upload. Had this information been available to Paul, would he have mentioned the whole Katie Hopkins doesn't inspire violent acts bit? Here's a bit from Josie's video that Paul Joseph Watson did not include in his response, and it's like she can predict the future.
The far right is Katie Hopkins, up until very recently, having a mainstream show that everyone could listen to the whole time. The far right is Nigel Farage putting these posters up that are actually using the same imagery that Hitler's propaganda used.
For fuck's sake!
Everyone's like, the thing is, if you ignore Katie Hopkins, she'll go away. If you ignore the Sun, it will go away. I ignore them, they've not gone away, they've got worse. If you have somebody on their Twitter calling for a final solution, it's incitement to violence, it's not acceptable, and it's not a joke. If you let Katie Hopkins get away with it, if you let Nigel fucking Farage get away with it, if you let these people get away with spewing their bile, what they do is they make other people's lives harder, and you're complicit in it.
The final solution phrase originated from the Nazis, so for the comments section, here's another template. Before we move on to the next section, I quickly want to show you this recent tweet from Katie Hopkins, which really sums up the kind of person she is on Twitter. This is a list of crimes that have happened in London over the last couple of weeks, horrific crimes, but nowhere in these stats does it show the race or the religion of the perpetrators, nor does it show the race or religion of the victims. However, Katie Hopkins has given this as an example of Londistan, as she calls it, referring to the fact that there are quite a lot of brown people in London in her eyes, and they're always up to no good. This is just blatant propaganda from Katie Hopkins, and arguably very, very racist as well, without a shred of evidence to back up her claims. Very, very recently, Katie Hopkins was pictured with Lauren Southern and other people from Defend Europe. Now, I have no idea if Katie Hopkins was on that boat during that mission, which eventually became the biggest self-own on the planet. But she is, as you will see in some Rubin Report clips coming up in just a second, she is modelling herself to become a Lauren Southern type character. Now, this does bring us to the Rubin Report section. Katie Hopkins appeared in a two-part interview for Rubin. I'm going to show you the highlights, if you can call them that. Now, if you're a fan of Rubin, please remember all of the interviews you've seen so far in this video. Please remember that the people interviewing Katie Hopkins have mostly disagreed with her and have tried to hold her feet to the fire. And now we come to Dave Rubin, who has the reputation of mainly talking to right-leaning and far right-leaning guests and giving them an easy ride. Let's see if that's any different as he interviews the female version of Milo Yiannopoulos.
Londonistan is a mess.
Yeah, so you would really argue that the mess you're dealing with, even though for the people that are triggered or upset by Trump, that your mess is much worse than ours.
Yeah, in many ways, you know, I look to America as kind of hope, like inspiration, hope. You've got someone tough in the White House that's determined to get things done. You've got a whole group of people who believe they'd been forgotten, which to me is the Brexiteers. It's the same, it's the rest of UK. That's the rest of America that isn't California or isn't New York. The rest of America got their voice heard, and that really speaks to the Brexiteer in me, where the rest of the UK finally got to say to London, no, you think you're smart, you think you're liberal, you don't live amongst the migration, you don't live with what we live with, and you're going to listen to us. And I think Trump did that, and I love that he does it.
I look at your Twitter sometimes, and I'll go, maybe she said that in a little way that I wouldn't have said it, or this. Yeah, it's just not exactly how I operate.
No, of course.
But I never, from what I've seen, I've never seen blatant racism or anti-Semitic stuff, or Islamophobia is not a word, but I really haven't seen that.
No.
If you have somebody on their Twitter calling for a final solution, it's incitement to violence, it's not acceptable, and it's not a joke.
Londonistan is a mess.
This is not hyperbole to compare Katie Hopkins to Hitler. This is not hyperbole to say that Katie Hopkins is merely a more ugly mouthpiece to accepted policy. It's simply some facts.
Yeah. I don't accept that we should just have open borders. I don't accept that we should pander to Muslim as and Islam as a religion. I don't accept, for example, I was speaking yesterday with a room full of feminists. I mean, you could just hear them just kind of melting when I spoke. But, you know, my challenge to them is, where are you Where are you, you feminazis?
Why is everyone with a different opinion automatically a Nazi? Oh, hang on, you're on my side, aren't you? Carry on.
I watched the pussy marches in Washington when I went to the inauguration of Trump. Best day of my life. And I went to the pussy marches to see what they were about. And, you know, they were just so pathetic. Why are you here? You don't know. You're just a coalition of weakness and victimhood. Be better. Like, women need to be better than that, and they're not. And women have never been more disappointing. Like, women need to be better than that, and they're not. And women have never been more disappointing. But my point is, I think that the thoughts of people that talk about globalization, the Soros-backed takeover of the first world, of Europe, the way that the Muslim mayors in the UK are spreading, and the power is starting to spread. We have a Muslim mayor, as you know, in London. That's when I go down the tinfoil hat route.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I've seen on Twitter, which I think is truly one of the most outrageous, ludicrous, insane things that I've seen on Twitter, has been a few times where which is the local police that have...
so London is Met Police, the Metropolitan Police come for me.
So
I'm not in their area.
So you've tweeted things, whatever it is that you've tweeted, and then they've requested that people report you and find other things that you've said and all this stuff for hate speech or whatever terms that they're using. Even though, as you've said, I've done no violence, I'm not calling for violence, blah, 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 blah. And they're literally word police now.
You may take away my job at the newspaper. You may have just managed to get me kicked off my radio show. It doesn't matter. There will be another platform if enough people feel that I give them a voice. And that's why I applaud what you do and what you guys are doing, because you are self-funded. The people that want to hear you are paying for you. And I love this idea that that will be the new truth, is that people will pay to be able to hear the truths that commissioners and TV commissioners and people that work in the media industry have tried to silence. And this is the new evolution of the us. Yeah. And I think I will be doing a similar thing, hopefully coming soon in the UK, where perhaps the people that feel they're being silenced can help fund a space where we will continue to speak.
God damn it. I just sat through an hour of that shit. I'm never gonna get that back. I'm so angry that when my sister comes home, I'm gonna divorce her, god damn it! Now, I'm so angry that I would never give that cuck any of my money. However, you might like to do it instead. So if you want to give the creator of this video some cash, because he used about 4 or 5 copyrighted clips in his video, so he can't monetize it. What a douche! If you want to give him money, like some kind of Soros thing, then you can send him $1. Send him $1 on PayPal. That's a one-off payment. Yeah, just once, just say, get out of my life. I'll give you $1. Now, fuck you. Get out of it. You can send him $2 if you want. You can send him $5. You see where I'm going with this? Send him money, basically. Or you can set up a monthly payment on Patreon, motherfucker. Patreon. I don't know what my accent is. At some point, I think it's like I'm from the Bronx, and at other points, I think I'm like a stereotypical black lady from the South. Thomas, Mama don't like that. Now, anyway, you can send him some money monthly on Patreon, and if you do that, then he will read your name out at the end of the video, motherfucker. All links will be below in the information box, and also there's a link to click at the end of the video. And until next time, motherfuckers, make America great again, and later, spiders.